Ancient forests were once seen as living beings guarded by powerful spirits. These forest guardians are a cornerstone of global mythology, a mysterious archetype that gave our ancestors a way to understand the dangerous and generous wild. Why did cultures on every continent, completely isolated from one another, create such strikingly similar protectors of the woods? By the end of this journey, you will understand how these myths were a secret code for survival, embedding vital ecological rules into unforgettable stories. We will explore why these beliefs emerged and the profound psychological need they fulfilled. What part of the human spirit still resonates with the idea of a protector in the wild? Deep within a primordial forest at dusk, the world feels transformed. Shadows stretch and merge, and the line between the solid earth and the spirit world grows thin. It is in this liminal space that the archetype of the forest guardian was born. This is a universal figure, a spiritual entity believed to inhabit and protect a specific, sacred woodland. But these guardians were never a single, uniform idea. Across the globe, they manifested on a vast spectrum. Some were benevolent deities, like the Greek nymphs known as dryads, who could offer guidance, healing, and a bountiful harvest to those who showed respect. Others were fearsome spirits, like the Slavic Leshy, a trickster who could lead careless travelers astray, punishing those who took from the woods without permission or violated its unspoken laws. Their core function, however, was always the same. They served as the moral and ecological conscience of the wilderness. They were the enforcers of a natural contract, a set of rules that ensured the forest's survival, and by direct extension, the survival of the humans who depended on it. This concept springs from a deep, instinctual part of the human psyche, our innate tendency to personify the forces we cannot control. The abstract, overwhelming power of nature, its terrifying dangers and its life-giving generosity, was too immense to comprehend. So our ancestors transformed it into something relatable, a sentient presence with a face and a will. By giving the forest a spirit, they could now negotiate with it. They could offer prayers, make promises, and seek forgiveness. This personification was not just superstition. It was a profound psychological tool that helped them understand their own place within a vast, living system. To truly grasp why these myths were so vital, we must journey to the very places they first emerged, to the oldest trees and the deepest folklore. For a small band of humans living deep within an ancient woodland, every rustle in the undergrowth held a hidden meaning. Their survival was a daily dialogue with the forest, a constant process of interpreting signs and making choices with immediate consequences. In this world of profound uncertainty, the idea of a forest guardian was not a flight of fancy, but a brilliant cognitive tool. It transformed the unpredictable chaos of nature into a relationship built on reciprocity. The concept of a master of animals, a spiritual figure found in countless hunter-gatherer traditions, perfectly embodies this. This guardian was not an owner of the beasts but their steward. A successful hunt was not mere luck, it was a gift granted by this spirit, a direct reward for showing proper respect. This respect was demonstrated through specific rituals before and after the hunt, and by a fundamental rule, taking only what was necessary for the community's immediate needs. The flip side of this sacred agreement was just as powerful. If a hunter was arrogant, wasteful, or took more than their share, the consequences were severe. The herds would seem to vanish, and famine would stalk the village. In the minds of the people, this was not a random ecological event. It was the deliberate wrath of the guardian, a punishment for breaking the natural contract. This belief system brilliantly codified early conservation principles. It embedded the idea of sustainability directly into spiritual law, ensuring that the community did not overhunt their territory and deplete their own food sources. These myths were, in essence, the very first user manuals for living in balance with a complex ecosystem. They provided a framework of rules that were far more compelling than any simple instruction, because they were backed by the ultimate authority, the spirit of the wild itself. This foundational need to personify the rules of survival explains why these guardian figures, while sharing a core purpose, blossomed into such a stunning variety of forms across the globe. From the shadowy depths of ancient woods, the face of the Green Man gazes out from the stone of medieval cathedrals. This enigmatic figure, all leaves and vines, seems to breathe with the very life of the forest itself. He is a powerful echo from a much older world, a direct descendant of pre-Christian spirits like Cernunnos, the Celtic horned god of the wild. The Green Man is not a symbol of gentle, manicured nature. He embodies the untamed, raw force of the woods, a power that is both creative and destructive. He is the lush growth of spring and the inevitable decay of autumn, all in one. His silent, watchful face carved into the pillars and arches of holy buildings served as a profound, daily reminder. It spoke of the wild world that existed just beyond the safety of the village walls, a world that provided everything from timber for warmth to game for food and herbs for healing. But this relationship was not one-sided. That same wild force could and would reclaim human settlements in a generation if respect was lost. The Green Man was not a deity to be prayed to in a formal temple. He was a pervasive presence felt in the deep, quiet parts of the forest, governing the essential, unending cycles of growth, death, and rebirth. His enduring image, woven into the very fabric of a new religious era, hammered home a vital survival lesson for communities, that humanity was an integral part of nature's system, not a separate force meant to dominate it. This deep-seated need to visualize our relationship with the wild was not unique to Europe. A world away, in the vast forests of Japan, a strikingly similar guardian concept took root, revealing a shared human understanding of the natural world. The sacred groves of ancient India were not merely collections of trees, they were the physical homes of living gods. In the epic poems like the Mahabharata, the forest is a character in itself, a realm where every rustling leaf could be the whisper of a yaksha or a vanadvata. These forest deities were the ultimate landowners, their authority tied to a single, ancient banyan tree, a clear mountain spring, or a secluded grove of sal trees. Their power was deeply ambivalent, a perfect reflection of the wilderness they governed. A benevolent yaksha could bestow a village with unexpected wealth, abundant rains, and fertile harvests. But if a woodcutter dared to fell a sacred tree without offering the proper prayers, or if a traveler polluted a spring, the same spirit could unleash sickness and hardship upon the entire community. This was not random punishment, it was the direct consequence of breaking a sacred covenant. The myth itself became a powerful legal and ecological framework. It established that certain groves were inviolable, off-limits to the axe and the plow. These became some of the planet's earliest protected sanctuaries, preserving biodiversity for millennia not through written law, but through profound spiritual belief. A community's survival was inextricably linked to its relationship with these divine guardians, a constant negotiation that ensured the forest's life-giving resources remained available for generations. This intricate system wove spiritual belief and environmental stewardship into a single, unbreakable thread, proving that the most effective conservation often begins with a story. This profound connection between myth and nature was not confined to the Old World, as the ancient forests of the Americas held their own, equally powerful guardians. The Amazon breathes with a life all its own, a vast and intricate system where every rustle carries meaning and every shadow holds a story. For the indigenous peoples who have called this immense rainforest home for millennia, the wilderness was never empty. It was watched over by powerful, tangible guardians, beings like the Curupira. This protector of the animal kingdom is depicted with a startling and brilliant feature: feet that are turned backward. This was no random monster design. His reversed footsteps are a masterstroke of mythological engineering, creating tracks that deliberately lead followers in the wrong direction, disorienting any hunter who dares to pursue game for greed or sport rather than necessity. The Curupira embodies the inverted, enigmatic logic of the forest itself, a place where human assumptions are useless and respect is the only law. He is the enforcer of a sacred balance, ensuring that no one takes more than their community truly needs. Alongside him roams the even more fearsome Mapinguari, a creature of immense power that serves as the jungle's ultimate warden. These were not merely tales to frighten children, they were a highly sophisticated form of ecological governance. The deep, instinctual fear of facing the Curupira's disorienting magic or the Mapinguari's raw power acted as a powerful deterrent against overhunting. This supernatural fear enforced real-world conservation, preventing the depletion of key species and maintaining the delicate balance of the food web. These myths encoded a profound truth that modern ecology is only now fully appreciating: that the forest is a sentient, interconnected community. Humans were understood to be a part of this community, living within it by a set of strict, reciprocal rules, not as masters standing apart from a warehouse of inert resources. To harm the forest was to invoke the wrath of its guardians, a consequence that meant hardship for everyone. This ancient perspective fundamentally challenges our contemporary view of wilderness as a passive backdrop or a mere collection of resources waiting for extraction. It raises a compelling question about our own psychology. What is it about the human mind that makes a story of a spirit with backward feet a more effective conservation tool than a list of written rules? Our minds are hardwired to find intention in the world around us. You have likely felt this yourself, glimpsing a figure in the shadows of a dim room or sensing a presence in an empty house. This instinct is known as hypersensitive agency detection, a fundamental feature of the human brain that was absolutely essential for survival in the ancient wild. For our ancestors, a rustle in the bushes was rarely just the wind. It was far safer to assume a conscious agent was responsible, be it a predator or a spirit, than to dismiss it and face potentially fatal consequences. This better safe than sorry approach to interpreting the world meant that attributing a broken branch or an unexpected silence to the deliberate action of a forest guardian was not a sign of primitive thought. It was a brilliant and cautious cognitive shortcut, one that promoted constant vigilance and deep respect for a dangerous environment. This instinct to see purpose everywhere partners with another powerful mental tool: our relentless drive for pattern recognition. We are natural storytellers, constantly connecting dots to create a coherent narrative from the chaos of life. When a hunter performed a specific ritual and then found game, the connection felt undeniable. The pattern was clear, the offering pleased the guardian, and the reward was granted. This created a powerful positive feedback loop that reinforced the behavior and cemented the belief across generations. The myth was not just a story, it was a confirmed theory of how the world worked. These cognitive biases together forged a powerful psychological framework. They transformed the overwhelming, unpredictable wilderness into something manageable and even negotiable. The abstract threat of starvation or disaster was personified into a spirit that could be appeased with respect and proper conduct. This reduced the deep anxiety of living at the mercy of nature by making the world feel predictable. The forest guardian became a mental tool for managing fear, a way to impose order on chaos and find a sense of control within a vast, untamable system. This very human need to create order from uncertainty did more than just soothe ancient anxieties. It became the perfect vessel for encoding and transmitting the most vital knowledge a community could possess. The rules of the forest were not written on any scroll, but etched into the very fabric of its folklore. A spirit's curse for felling a certain tree was far more than a supernatural warning. It was a highly effective way to preserve a life-saving piece of information. That specific tree might have deep, stabilizing roots that prevented a hillside from collapsing onto a village during heavy rains. Or perhaps its bark contained a potent medicine, a resource too vital to be harvested carelessly. These myths transformed abstract ecological principles into gripping, emotional narratives that a community could not afford to forget. A story about a guardian dwelling near a treacherous swamp, one who led travelers to a watery fate, served as a permanent, unforgettable danger sign. It marked that entire area as off-limits, preventing accidents and safeguarding the community without a single posted warning. This oral encyclopedia of survival was masterfully written in the language of myth. The Guardian became the ultimate teacher, its legends encoding everything from the seasonal migration paths of game to the hidden locations of freshwater springs. The dramatic consequences within these stories, the sudden illness or vanishing herds that followed a broken taboo, created a powerful cause and effect link in the collective memory. This ensured the accurate transmission of a cumulative body of wisdom across countless generations, long before the first word was ever written down. So, what were the specific life or death rules these mythical enforcers were designed to uphold? Their primary mandate was the sacred law of balance, a principle that governed every single interaction with the wild. The most fundamental rule was the prohibition against waste. A hunter who took a deer only for its prized antlers, leaving the rest to rot, was not just being irresponsible. In the eyes of the community and the guardian, this was a direct insult to the spirit that had offered the gift. Such an act invited immediate retribution, ensuring this lesson was learned swiftly and decisively. This belief actively prevented the overexploitation of resources, enforcing a sustainable harvest long before the term ever existed. Another critical rule involved respecting the sanctuary of certain places. A grove of ancient trees or a secluded mountain pass might be declared the sacred home of a particularly powerful spirit. This divine ownership created a de facto nature preserve, protecting watersheds, allowing animal populations to recover, and preserving the delicate biodiversity that kept the entire ecosystem resilient. To enter such a place without the proper rituals was to risk invoking a curse upon your entire family. The fear of supernatural punishment was a far stronger deterrent for an ancient villager than any fine or written law could ever be. This intricate system wove spiritual belief and practical survival into a single, unbreakable thread, guiding human behavior in a way that ensured the forest and the people within it could thrive for generations. The guardian myth was the vessel, but the cargo was pure, essential, life-sustaining knowledge. The true power of these myths was felt not in abstract belief, but in the daily choices they governed. A sacred grove was not merely a pretty story. It was a legally protected space, its boundaries enforced by the profound fear of a guardian's curse. To even break a branch within its confines was an unthinkable act, a direct challenge to a divine warden. This spiritual taboo functioned with the force of a modern environmental law, preserving entire ecosystems for generations. Similarly, the ritual of offering the first kill of a hunt was far more than a gesture of thanks. It was a brilliant psychological and ecological check. By dedicating that initial hard-won prize, the hunter was publicly acknowledging that the animal was a gift, not a right. This practice actively countered the human impulse to take as much as possible, embedding a principle of restraint directly into the moment of success. It prevented overharvesting by making gratitude a mandatory part of the process. Other taboos were even more precise, targeting specific threats to long-term survival. Wasting any part of an animal was a grave offense, ensuring that every resource was used to its fullest potential. Hunting a pregnant creature was strictly forbidden, a clear recognition that the future of the herd, and thus the community's future meals, depended on allowing the young to be born. The enforcement for breaking these rules was immediate and terrifying in the community's mind. A sudden illness, a string of inexplicable misfortunes, or the terrifying experience of being lost in the woods despite knowing the path, all of this was seen as the direct wrath of the forest guardian. This belief system created a powerful internal policeman for every individual, a deep-seated ecological conscience that guided behavior far more effectively than any external authority could. It was an intuitive, inherited wisdom, a profound understanding that human survival was a contract built on reciprocity with the living world. That apology whispered to the spirit of the deer was far more than a simple prayer. It was the core transaction in a sacred gift economy. Our ancestors did not see the forest as a warehouse of inert supplies, but as a living, breathing relative with its own consciousness and generosity. Every resource taken from the woods, from the mightiest stag to the humblest medicinal root, was understood not as a rite of conquest, but as a gift offered by a sentient world. And with every gift received, there came a profound obligation to give something back. This created a constant cycle of reciprocity, a relationship built on mutual respect rather than one-sided taking. A hunter would not only express thanks for the animal's life, but would often perform specific rituals to ensure its spirit would return to the guardian and be reborn, thus continuing the cycle. A gatherer, before harvesting a plant, might leave a small offering of tobacco or a strand of hair as a symbolic exchange, acknowledging the debt incurred. This practice was not empty superstition. It was a powerful psychological tool that actively cultivated a mindset of gratitude and interdependence. It forced a moment of pause and reflection before any act of taking, directly countering the human tendencies toward greed and thoughtless exploitation. The forest guardian stood at the very center of this entire system. It was the personified representative of the wild, the entity to whom thanks were directed and from whom permission was formally sought. By making the relationship feel personal, the myth made the responsibility feel immediate and undeniable. This entire worldview fostered a deep-seated ethic of care and stewardship. The forest's vitality was not a separate concern. It was directly tied to the community's own survival across countless generations. This stands in such stark contrast to the later, more extractive worldviews that would come to dominate, where nature is often framed as a dead resource to be managed or conquered. The artistic depictions of these guardians across cultures were not random. They were carefully designed to visually reinforce this sacred, reciprocal role. A carved antler mask transforms the wearer into the very spirit of the woods. These were not objects of simple decoration, but powerful tools for making the unseen guardian visible and its authority undeniable. Across continents and cultures, the artistic language used to depict these protectors was remarkably consistent. Antlers, like those of the Celtic Cernunnos, were not just a sign of strength. They symbolized a direct connection to the animal kingdom and the cycles of shedding and regrowth. A face woven from leaves and vines, like the Green Man, was a living map of the forest itself, a breathing embodiment of its life force. These recurring motifs of flora and fauna fused together sent a clear, universal message. The guardian was not the master of nature, but its ultimate expression, a being whose very form declared dominion over all living things. This visual symbolism made a complex ecological idea instantly understandable to everyone. A child seeing a statue of a spirit with the body of a man and the horns of a stag would intuitively grasp that this being spoke for the deer in the meadow and the trees on the hill. Art translated abstract principles into a form that could be felt in the gut, not just understood in the mind. The purpose of these artifacts was profoundly functional. A small amulet carved in the shape of a forest spirit was carried not as a lucky charm, but as a constant, tangible reminder of the rules one lived by. It was a physical anchor for the ecological conscience, a weight in the pocket that brought to mind the consequences of waste or disrespect. In ritual ceremonies, the donning of a guardian mask was a sacred act. The dancer ceased to be a mere villager. They became the vessel for the forest's voice. For the community watching, the line between story and reality blurred. The myth became a visceral, immediate presence. Its lessons on balance and reciprocity felt with a power that mere words could never achieve. This immersive experience welded the community's identity to the well-being of their environment. Even in more permanent forms, this visual language continued its work. Ancient petroglyphs carved into rock faces showing a humble hunter offering a gift to a towering, antlered figure were not simple records of events. They were enduring sermons etched in stone, perpetual reminders of the proper, respectful relationship between humanity and the wild. This was how a non-literate culture encoded its most vital survival manual, using a universal grammar of symbols that ensured every generation understood their role within the natural order. Art was the medium and the lesson was survival, but as human societies began to change, so too did the role of these ancient protectors. The first field cleared by a stone axe marked a quiet revolution in the human story. As settlements took root and crops were cultivated, the ancient forests began to recede from the center of daily life. No longer the primary source of all sustenance, the deep woods transformed in the human imagination from a sacred partner to a frontier of chaos. The old guardians of the wild found their roles shifting dramatically in this new, ordered world. The Greek god Pan, once a powerful spirit of the untamed mountains, became a figure of panic and irrational fear, his music a symbol of the disorder that civilization sought to push back. Other forest beings were not simply forgotten, they were actively recast. Deities who once commanded respect were demoted to mere tricksters or malevolent sprites, their power diminished, their domain now limited to the shadowy fringes just beyond the plowed field. This was a profound psychological and cultural pivot. The essential, life-giving qualities of nature were slowly transferred to new gods, deities of the grain and the hearth who presided over the predictable cycles of sowing and reaping. The focus shifted from a relationship of reciprocity with a powerful, wild guardian to a narrative of controlling a resistant landscape. This new story was one of separation, where humanity stood apart from nature, tasked with subduing it. The ancient survival myths, with their intricate rules of balance, did not vanish, but they were increasingly overwritten by a new and powerful script, one that placed humanity in a role of dominion. This fundamental reordering of our place in the world would echo for millennia, setting the stage for how we would eventually come to see the wild not as a relative, but as a resource. Even as empires rose and cities grew, the old spirits of the forest refused to fade entirely. They were instead given new roles within the ordered pantheons of classical antiquity. The Roman Faunus, a god of the wild woodlands, was no longer the absolute master of his domain. He became a more pastoral figure, his power softened and his realm pushed to the margins of a civilized world. He represented a nostalgic link to a simpler, rural past, a time before laws and walls defined human life. Similarly, in the deep Germanic woods, the myth of the woodwose persisted. These wild men of the woods, covered in hair and living in complete isolation, were not seen as divine guardians. They were cautionary figures, embodying the latent savagery that civilization had supposedly conquered. They stood as a stark reminder of what humanity could revert to without the constraints of society and faith. the forest itself underwent a profound symbolic shift in the medieval mind. It was no longer primarily a life-giving partner, but a moral testing ground. In the chivalric romance of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, the wilderness through which the knight travels is a place of profound spiritual trial. The Green Knight himself is a magnificent and terrifying fusion of the natural and the supernatural, a direct descendant of the ancient green man archetype. He is not an ecological manager enforcing rules of harvest, but a literary device representing the raw, untamed challenges that lie beyond the safety of King Arthur's court. His very existence tests Gawain's virtue, his courage, and his truthfulness. The story uses the power of the wild to explore internal human conflicts. This process of moralization was widespread. Medieval bestiaries and sermons would often recast pagan nature spirits as demons or as symbols of Christian vices like lust or gluttony. A spirit once respected for its control over game might be reimagined as a demon leading good people into sin. This reframing preserved the archetype of the forest being, but systematically diluted its original, survival-based function. The guardian was transformed from a vital ecological enforcer into a symbol, a relic of a bygone world whose lessons were now more about personal salvation than community survival. Yet the sheer endurance of these figures, even in their altered forms, speaks to a deep and unresolved psychological need. They persisted because they still answered a fundamental human question about our relationship with the untamed world, a question that would soon be asked with new urgency as explorers set sail for continents unknown. The shaman stands at the edge of the firelight, a human bridge spanning the worlds of the village and the wild. In countless traditions, this figure held the sacred and practical role of intermediary, the only one who could directly converse with the forest guardians. Their work was not a display of power over nature, but a profound exercise in diplomacy with it. Through rhythmic drumming, ceremonial dance, and deep trance states, the shaman's consciousness would journey into the spirit realm. There, they would meet the master of animals face to face, not to demand a hunt, but to respectfully request one. They might negotiate the terms, perhaps promising the community's continued reverence or offering songs of gratitude in exchange for the lives of a few deer. This process transformed the abstract concept of a guardian into an active, communicative partner. The shaman was the community's translator, fluent in a language far older than words. They could read the intention behind a sudden change in the wind, interpret the warning in a woodpecker's call, or understand the message carried by the specific pattern of falling leaves. A sudden scarcity of game was not a random event. It was a message from the guardian, a complaint about some community transgression that the shaman had to decipher and address. A successful hunt, therefore, was never just luck. It was the direct result of a successful diplomatic mission, a treaty agreed upon in the spirit world and manifested in the physical one. This entire system rested on a fundamental belief in the personhood of the forest. The wild was not a collection of things, but a society of conscious beings. The shaman's role was to maintain a positive relationship with this powerful society, using sophisticated protocols of respect and exchange. This required immense knowledge, not only of plants and animals, but of stories, songs, and the subtle etiquette of the spirit world. The shaman was the keeper of this living relationship, a role of immense responsibility that blended ecology, psychology, and spirituality into a single discipline. This direct, experiential communication stands in stark contrast to how these rich, living beliefs were later encountered by outsiders, who often arrived with notebooks and a very different worldview. A story told by firelight is a living thing. For thousands of years, the intricate knowledge of the forest guardians survived not in books, but in the breath and memory of the people. This was the domain of the oral tradition, a dynamic and powerful system of preservation. An elder sharing a tale of the Leshy or the Curupira was not merely entertaining the young, they were performing a vital act of cultural transmission. With every telling, the story breathed anew. The teller's voice would drop to a whisper when describing the guardian's approach, their hands shaping the form of the spirit in the air, their eyes widening to convey the peril of disrespect. This was not a dry recitation, it was a full sensory experience designed to make the lesson land not just in the mind, but in the heart and the gut. The emotional charge of a performance, amplified by the rhythm of a drum or the haunting notes of a flute, transformed abstract rules into visceral fear and profound respect. A child who felt a genuine shiver of dread hearing about the Mapingary's roar would carry that caution into the woods the next day, their behavior guided by a memory far more potent than any written list of prohibitions. This living tradition allowed the myths to adapt without losing their core. If a community migrated to a new forest with different dangers, the story of the local guardian might subtly shift to incorporate those new threats, ensuring the survival code remained perfectly relevant to the current environment. The collective act of listening and remembering around the communal fire did more than pass on information. It welded the community together. It reinforced a shared identity rooted in a common understanding of their world and their sacred responsibilities within it. This was how the voice of the guardians was kept alive and immediate, a constant whisper in the collective ear of the community for generation after generation. The arrival of the written word would eventually still this vibrant, breathing process, capturing the stories forever, but also lifting them from the soil from which they grew. Carl Jung saw a ghost in the machine of the human mind. In the 20th century, this pioneering psychologist proposed that the forest guardian was far more than a cultural artifact. It was a fundamental archetype, a psychic blueprint hardwired into what he called the collective unconscious. He envisioned this as a deep, inherited layer of the psyche shared by all humanity, a vast reservoir of universal symbols and patterns. From this perspective, the recurring figure of the wild protector, whether a stern leshy or a leafy green man, was not invented by any single culture, but rather emerged from this shared psychic soil. Jung might have identified this figure as the old wise man of the wilderness or the untamed spirit of nature, an archetype representing the primal instinct, ancient wisdom, and the raw, authentic aspects of the self that modern, structured civilization so often forces us to repress. The myth, then, becomes a profound external projection of an internal psychological reality. When our ancestors spoke of encountering a guardian in the woods, they were also, on a symbolic level, confronting a powerful part of their own inner world. This interpretation suggests that the enduring power of these stories lies in their ability to address a fundamental human hunger for wholeness. Engaging with these myths, whether by reading them, creating art about them, or simply spending reflective time in a natural setting, can be seen as a form of active imagination, a way to reopen a dialogue with this lost, instinctual part of ourselves. It is an attempt to integrate our deep, primal wisdom with our conscious, modern minds, healing the perceived rift between humanity and nature that first began with the clearing of that primordial field. This psychological lens does not diminish the myths, it enriches them, adding a profound layer of personal relevance to their ancient survival code. The guardian is not only a memory of how to live in the wild, but a map for navigating the wilderness within. And as we moved further into the modern era, this internal map would be tested by a new, powerful, and radically different way of seeing the world. The first case of clinical anxiety was diagnosed not in a forest but in a city. This is no mere coincidence. The emerging field of ecopsychology proposes a direct link between our modern mental health challenges and the severed bond with the natural world that myths like the forest guardian once so powerfully nurtured. Where those ancient stories wove humanity into a web of reciprocal relationships, our contemporary worldview often frames nature as a separate, mechanical system, a collection of resources waiting for our use. This shift from being a part of a living community to being a master of a dead machine has had profound psychological consequences. A deep sense of loneliness, a feeling of drifting without purpose, and a persistent, low-grade distress can all be understood, in part, as symptoms of this ecological alienation. We evolved within a vibrant, communicative landscape, and our minds still expect that conversation. When it is replaced by the hum of machinery and the glow of screens, a fundamental part of our psyche feels unheard. The Forest Guardian archetype was not just a story about rules, it was a framework for a healthy, relational identity. It told every individual that they mattered within a vast, living system, that their actions had meaning and their respect had value. In a world without such guardians, that sense of purpose can feel harder to find. Ecopsychology suggests that the path to healing this modern malaise lies in re-engaging with the symbolic language of these old stories. They are not instructions to be followed literally, but doorways back into a state of mind. Walking through an old-growth woodland and allowing yourself to feel its presence not as a collection of trees, but as a being with its own spirit, is a therapeutic act. It is a way of reopening a channel of communication that was never meant to be closed, creating new narratives of connection, whether through art, writing, or simply a changed perspective, can help mend the rift within ourselves. In this light, the idea of the forest guardian transforms into a powerful symbol for the healing and wisdom that the natural world continuously offers. It represents the quiet, patient intelligence of an ecosystem that knows how to sustain itself, a model of resilience and balance we desperately need to remember. This perspective reframes our environmental crises not merely as political or technological problems, but as a profound spiritual and psychological imperative. The call to protect ancient forests and restore damaged rivers becomes an act of collective self-care, a necessary step in addressing the inner emptiness that fuels so much of our consumption. The potential for revival lies in this recognition, in understanding that the health of the planet and the health of the human soul are one and the same. The ancient trees of Fangorn Forest speak with a voice as deep as the earth itself. This is Treebeard, the oldest of the Ents in J.R.R. Tolkien's epic world, a character who perfectly embodies the forest guardian archetype for a modern audience. He is not a swift or impulsive being. His thoughts move with the deliberate pace of centuries, and his primary concern is the well-being of the forest he shepherds. When the hobbits Merry and Pippin first encounter him, they are meeting a force of nature given conscious form. Treebeard's monumental decision to go to war against the wizard Saruman is not made lightly. It is the inevitable response of the natural world pushed beyond its limits, a reaction to the wholesale, careless destruction of his trees for the fires of industry. His famous declaration that there is no curse in Elvish, in Tish, or the tongues of men for such treachery is a moment of profound moral clarity. It is the voice of the ancient wilderness itself, articulating a horror so complete it defies language. This modern guardian, like his mythological ancestors, serves as the conscience of the wild, a living reminder that the forest is not a limitless resource but a community with a will to survive. Across the fantasy genre, this archetype continually resurfaces to deliver the same urgent warning. In the world of Westeros, the legend of the Green Man is woven into the fabric of the faith of the Seven, a spectral echo of a much older, more primal religion that once governed the land. And in the animated masterpiece Princess Mononoke, the entire ecosystem is quite literally alive with guardian spirits. There is the great forest spirit, a majestic, life-giving being by day, and a terrifying, unstoppable force of raw power by night. There are the small, chattering kodama, whose presence indicates a forest's health, and the massive boar god Okoto. These are not distant gods, they are active participants in a brutal conflict against the humans of Iron Town, who are consuming the forest to fuel their forges. The film refuses to offer simple answers, instead presenting a heartbreaking tragedy where both sides believe they are fighting for their survival. The guardian spirits are neither purely good nor evil. They are the fierce, rightful defenders of their home, reacting with justified rage to its systematic destruction. These contemporary stories are far more than simple entertainment. They are the modern vessels for our oldest ecological fears and wisdom. They repackage the ancient contract between humanity and the wild for an audience that may never have heard of the Kurupira or the Leshy. By framing these age-old conflicts within gripping narratives of war, honor, and loss, fantasy literature and film keep a vital conversation alive. They force us to confront the consequences of short-sighted greed and to witness the majestic, terrifying power of a natural world that will ultimately defend itself. This cultural persistence proves the archetype is not a relic, but a resilient and adaptable part of our collective imagination. It bridges the gap between ancient campfire tales and the digital screen, ensuring the essential message of reciprocity and respect is never forgotten. The sacred grove protected by a spirit was not just a spiritual idea, it was an early form of conservation science. Our ancestors observed that disturbing certain trees or hunting specific animals led to tangible hardship for the community. They did not have the language of modern ecology, but their myths perfectly described its principles. What they called the guardian's blessing for a successful hunt, we now identify as a stable predator-prey relationship, a sign of a resilient food web. That solitary, ancient fig tree declared sacred by a local spirit often turned out to be what biologists now call a keystone species. Its fruit fed birds and monkeys, its roots stabilized the riverbank, and its broad canopy created a microclimate for countless other plants to thrive. To cut it down was not just a spiritual offense, it was an ecological catastrophe. The guardian's curse was the community's experience of the resulting soil erosion, the disappearance of game, and the silting of a freshwater spring. These consequences are what modern science terms the loss of ecosystem services, the essential benefits that nature provides for free. The intuitive rules embedded in the guardian myths were a brilliant, pre-literate way of managing these complex systems. A taboo against hunting a certain animal during its breeding season directly preserved population levels. A prohibition on fishing in a particular stream protected a spawning ground. These were not arbitrary restrictions, they were precise, culturally enforced regulations born from deep, generational observation. The myth provided the why, the compelling story that ensured the rule was followed, while the rule itself protected the intricate workings of the forest. This reveals a profound truth. Our ancestors were not simply telling stories, they were encoding data. Their spiritual narratives were vessels for a hard-won understanding of biodiversity and interdependence, an understanding that our own science is now meticulously confirming with satellite imagery and statistical models. The old myths and the new data are not in opposition. They are two different languages describing the same fundamental reality, that life is a connected web, and to pull carelessly on one thread is to unravel the entire tapestry. A new kind of shadow fell upon the ancient woods, one cast not by trees but by foreign sails on the horizon. The arrival of colonial powers did more than redraw maps. It launched a direct assault on the worldviews that had sustained entire continents for millennia. For the colonizers, the dense forests were not a sacred, conscious relative, but a vast, untapped inventory of timber, minerals, and land. In this new, utilitarian vision, the indigenous myths of forest guardians were not just wrong, they were a dangerous obstacle to progress. These complex spiritual systems were systematically labeled as pagan superstition, a primitive nonsense that needed to be erased to civilize the native populations and fully exploit the resources they protected. The sacred grove, once inviolable under the watchful eye of a spirit, was now just a stand of valuable timber. The ritual offering before a hunt was recast as a wasteful, idolatrous practice. This was not merely a difference of opinion, it was a calculated campaign of cultural suppression designed to break the people's bond with their land. The chainsaw and the cross became the tools of this dismantling, one cutting down the physical trees, the other outlawing the stories that gave them meaning. The profound oral traditions passed down through countless generations around communal fires were disrupted as elders were displaced, languages were forbidden, and children were taken away to schools where their heritage was beaten out of them. This cultural genocide severed a vital nerve, the intuitive, inherited knowledge of how to live within that specific ecosystem. The internal policeman that the forest guardian represented, the deep-seated ecological conscience, was systematically silenced. With that spiritual restraint removed, the path was clear for unchecked extraction. The land could now be treated as a dead resource, its rivers polluted, its animals hunted to the brink, and its ancient trees felled without a second thought. The loss of these myths was therefore a double tragedy, an immense cultural wound that simultaneously opened a deep ecological one. The old, story-based conservation laws were erased, and in their place came a silence that allowed for the rampant consumption that defines so much of our modern environmental crisis. Recognizing this history is not about assigning blame from a distance. It is about understanding a fundamental rupture in the human story. It helps us appreciate the incredible resilience of the guardian myths that did survive, often preserved in secret or adapted under immense pressure. It also illuminates the profound significance of contemporary movements led by indigenous communities to revitalize their languages, reclaim their ceremonies, and legally protect their ancestral lands. These efforts are not simply about cultural revival, they are a form of ecological restoration, an attempt to repair that severed nerve and listen once more for the whisper of the guardians in the trees. This context forces a stark realization that the stories a culture tells about nature are never trivial. They are the living pillars that hold up both cultural identity and the integrity of the living world. A city street at midnight is a world away from a moonlit forest. The concrete beneath our feet, the artificial glow of streetlights, the constant hum of distant traffic, these are the sensory inputs that shape the modern human experience. Over the past few centuries, a great migration has pulled us from the soil and into manufactured landscapes, creating a chasm between our daily lives and the ancestral environments that forged our oldest stories. For the first time in history, a majority of humanity lives at a remove from the immediate realities of weather, seasonal foraging, and the intricate behaviors of wildlife. In this new context, the forest guardian undergoes a subtle but profound transformation. It ceases to be a felt presence, a spiritual warden whose rules dictated the success of a hunt or the safety of a path. Instead, it becomes an abstraction, a romantic character from a fairy tale, stripped of its original power and urgency. The tangible fear of a predator's eyes in the dark, the immediate reward of finding a fresh water spring, these have been replaced by the abstract anxieties of social standing and economic pressure. This disconnect makes it incredibly difficult for a modern mind to grasp the survival imperative these myths encoded. When your food comes packaged from a store and your water flows from a tap, the idea that a story could be a vital manual for community survival can feel distant and academic. The sophisticated psychological system that once managed our deepest fears and guided our most crucial actions is now often dismissed as primitive folklore. Reconnecting with the true power of these stories demands a conscious effort to bridge this urban-wild divide. It asks us to step away from the screens and the schedules, to walk into a living woodland and simply listen, not for a literal voice, but for the reawakening of an older, more intuitive way of being in the world. The resurgence of nature spirituality in recent decades is breathing new life into these ancient archetypes. Modern pagan and druidic paths are consciously reaching back through time, reclaiming deities like Cernunnos, the Celtic horned god, not as historical curiosities but as vital symbols of the untamed, masculine energy of the wild. Alongside him, goddess figures embody the fertile, life-giving earth, creating a divine dyad that mirrors the essential cycles of nature. For a Wiccan practicing a ritual in a suburban garden or a druid honoring the solstice in a public park, these are not distant metaphors. They are felt as living presences, conscious forces that guide a deeply ethical and reciprocal relationship with the natural world. This is a deliberate act of resacralization, an attempt to stitch the sacred back into the fabric of a world that often treats nature as a resource. It represents a profound spiritual response to the ecological crisis, using the old language of guardians and spirits to articulate a modern, urgent environmental ethic. The practitioner who leaves an offering of water for the land whites before a walk is enacting the same principle of reciprocity that guided the ancient hunter, a small but meaningful gesture in a renewed gift economy with the earth. This conscious revival proves the archetype's power is not locked in the past. It remains a vibrant, adaptable framework for those seeking to rebuild a relationship of wonder, respect, and care with the living world, demonstrating that the old ways can still light a path forward. A river that runs clear and a stable climate are not merely resources. They are the direct blessings of a healthy, functioning ecosystem, the modern expression of the guardian's favor. Today, we can understand this ancient archetype as a profound metaphor for biodiversity itself. An entire old-growth forest with its intricate web of fungi, plants, and animals operates as a single, complex guardian. This living entity regulates the very air we breathe, purifies our water, and maintains the delicate balance that makes our world habitable. Its health is not an abstract environmental issue, it is the foundation of our own survival. The consequences of breaking our contract with this system are no longer just local legends. We now witness the Guardian's displeasure on a global scale, in the rising frequency of devastating wildfires, in pandemics that emerge from disrupted habitats, and in the widespread crop failures resulting from unstable weather patterns. These are not random acts of nature, they are the logical outcomes of a relationship thrown out of balance. The modern rituals of respect look different, but their purpose is unchanged. Enacting strong conservation laws is our way of showing reverence. Protecting a wetland from development is our offering of thanks. Restoring a degraded prairie is our act of reciprocity. This metaphorical framework gives a human face to a vast, complex crisis. A graph showing rising global temperatures can feel distant and impersonal, but the story of a protector defending its home speaks directly to our emotions and our innate sense of justice. It reminds us that we are not managing a portfolio of natural assets. We are engaged in a continuous, living relationship with the earth. This relationship, like any other, demands our respect, our caution, and a fundamental understanding that to take without giving back is to invite a reckoning. The old myths offer us a language of care that our modern world has largely forgotten, a way to frame the urgent work of preservation not as a burden, but as the sacred duty it has always been. That ancient prohibition against wasting a single part of the deer finds its direct echo in the modern zero-waste movement. The old myths understood a fundamental truth we are now relearning through crisis, that long-term human survival is inextricably linked to a simple but profound shift in perception. We must learn to see the natural world not as a collection of objects to be used, but as a community of subjects with which we are in constant relationship. Our ancestors' prosperity was not measured by how much they could take from the wild, but by how well they understood and respected its inherent limits and cycles. They knew that the forest's generosity was conditional, a gift offered within a framework of natural law. Today, this ancient insight translates into the core principles of sustainability, circular economies, and the innovative practice of biomimicry. Biomimicry is the conscious effort to design our human systems, from agriculture to architecture, to emulate nature's brilliant, waste-free cycles. Imagine a building that cools itself like a termite mound, or a farm that functions like a prairie ecosystem, where the waste of one process becomes the fuel for another. This is not new technology, it is ancient wisdom applied with modern tools. It is the practical embodiment of the Guardian's law, recognizing that nature holds the blueprints for resilience. The old ritual of offering the first kill to the spirit of the forest finds its contemporary parallel in the growing imperative to give back. Reforestation projects, wetland restoration, and marine conservation are our modern offerings of gratitude. They are our way of reciprocating, of acknowledging the debt we incur with every resource we consume. This challenges the most dangerous assumption of our modern age, the belief in infinite growth on a finite planet. The forest guardian myths present a timeless model for resilience built not on expansion and control, but on observation, adaptation, and deep respect. They teach us that true survival has never been about conquering the wild. It is about learning its complex language and having the humility to live by its elegant, non-negotiable rules. In an era of climate instability and ecological loss, this rediscovered wisdom may be the most critical survival code we possess. Our journey through these ancient stories reveals a stunning truth that the first environmentalists were not scientists or politicians, but storytellers. The mysterious guardians of the forest were never meant to be taken as literal beings in the way we understand a character in a novel. They were instead a brilliant technology of the mind, a psychological and cultural operating system designed for survival. This system used the power of narrative to encode the most vital rules for living within a complex ecosystem, turning abstract ecological principles into unforgettable, emotionally charged legends. The fear of the Curupira's backward feet was a far more effective deterrent against overhunting than any posted sign could ever be. The reverence for the green man's leafy gaze cultivated a deeper respect for the untamed wild than any lecture on biodiversity. These myths were the original user manuals for a sustainable society, written in a language the human heart instinctively understands. Our ancestors possessed a profound, intuitive grasp of balance, an understanding that we are only now rediscovering through the hard data of climate science and conservation biology. They knew something we are desperately trying to relearn, that a relationship with the living world must be built on reciprocity, not domination. As we face the unprecedented environmental challenges of our time, these old guardians speak to us across the centuries. They remind us that seeing the world as alive and sacred is not a primitive superstition. It is a profound and necessary wisdom, a call to listen more closely to the whispers of the wind in the trees and the flow of water over stone. They invite us to find the wild places that still remain, to walk into them with humility, and to remember our true place not as masters of nature, but as one thread in its vast, interconnected web. If this exploration of our oldest protectors has resonated with you, we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe for more journeys into the heart of the world's greatest historical mysteries.